This famous Ed and Lorraine case may be the best example of when someone tried to claim a demonic possession led to a crime. The case is centered around a young man named Oren Cheyenne Johnson and the man that he a 40-year-old named Alan Bono. Mental Floss says there was no question that Johnson killed Bono. However, his defense attorney, 33-year-old Martin Minella, planned to argue that the 19-year-old was not guilty by virtue of demonic possession. Ahead of the trial, Minella pled his case through the media, giving interviews to major press outlets. The courts have dealt with the existence of God, and now they'll be asked to deal with the existence of the demonic spirit, Minella told People. The day after Johnson was arrested, Lorraine Warren called the Brookfield police and blamed the killing on a demon. Johnson didn't actually say the devil made him do it, he only claimed that he didn't remember stabbing Bono. However, according to the testimony of an officer on the scene, Johnson did tell the police, "I think I hurt someone." Now, this defense didn't actually work out for Johnson. He was inevitably convicted of first-degree manslaughter and sentenced to 10 to 20 years in prison. However, he didn't serve nearly that many and was released after less than 5 years for being a really good prisoner. In my opinion, I kind of doubt that this guy was actually under the influence of a demonic possession, and clearly the jury, they felt the same way. That being said though, he did seem pretty committed to that story during the trial, so I suppose it's something to consider. Number 3 on this list is Manuel Vela. Several years ago, Manuel Vela killed his pregnant girlfriend. It was a brutal murder and an incident which climaxed in a police chase where he was finally captured. Many people obviously asked the question, why? And the answer may shock you. The Mystique says Vela told the interviewers that the murder of his girlfriend and her child were part of a religious and political statement. He was possibly trying to enlighten the crowd of his opinion on pro-life ideologies. However, it seemed like his motivation behind the murders wasn't just politically backed. He went on to say how he is the Antichrist and the voices in his head guided him on what to do. Many of his analogies were akin to things that have happened in the history of Christianity. Vela literally believed that he was the Antichrist, guys. That sounds like a pretty textbook example of a demonic possession to me. At this point, Vela's competency to stand trial was in question and a hearing needed to be done. Manuel never actually made it to the hearing though, because in January 2017, authorities found him dead in his cell. He had taken his own life. Number 2 on this list is the Son of Sam. The Son of Sam was a killer that caused one of the biggest citywide police investigations ever. Ranker says New York City during the summer of 1976 was a hotbed of anger, frustration, and fear, and David Berkowitz, aka the Son of Sam, didn't help the matter by killing 6 people and wounding 7 others in the span of 1 year. After his arrest, Berkowitz told police that he was under the control of a demon named Harvey who inhabited his neighbor's dog and implored him to kill people. Once, during a 3-month break from his murder spree, Berkowitz wrote the New York Post to say, "I am still here like a spirit roaming the night, thirsty, hungry, seldom stopping to rest." After being incarcerated, Berkowitz received a sentence of 365 years in prison, by the way. He became a born-again Christian, but he still believes that the devil and God are fighting for possession of his soul. No wonder this guy got 365 years. Not only did he kill 6 people, but to write to the Times saying that he's still thirsty and hungry, yeah. This is clearly a man that needs to be kept behind bars for literally ever. Once again, I want to stress the fact here that I'm not a religious man personally. When I hear a story like this, I believe that it's far more likely that the Son of Sam was just truly mentally unstable and probably in need of some very serious help. He truly believed, though, that a demon had called upon him and was using his body as a vessel for evil. We may never know what truly caused him to do this, but at least he's locked up for good and won't be doing it again anytime soon. And finally, number 1 on this list is Michael Taylor. Several decades ago, Taylor was apparently possessed by a horrible demon, and this time it really got the better of him. Ranker says in 1974, Michael Taylor was just a simple butcher living in Ossett, England, who was suddenly overcome by an evil spirit. He had an exorcism performed on October 5th and 6th of 1974, and while it went okay, the priests weren't able to expel all of the demons. According to Bill Ellis, an authority on folklore and the occult in contemporary culture, in an all-night ceremony, the exorcist believed that they had invoked and cast out at least 40 demons, including those of incest, bestiality, blasphemy, and lewdness. At the end, exhausted, they allowed Taylor to go home, although they felt that at least 3 demons, insanity, murder, and violence, were still left in him. So, you know, kind of the big 3. After he returned home, Taylor immediately murdered his wife by ripping out her eyes and tongue and then tearing off most of the skin from her face, finally strangling their pet poodle. Police found Taylor standing in the street naked and covered in blood, shouting, "It is the blood of Satan." This is truly one of the most graphic crimes I've ever read about, honestly. Like, to think that this happened in real life is extremely scary. Also, if he was possessed by some type of demon, like, what demon was this and how do we all avoid this? I feel like this is pretty pertinent information considering what Taylor ended up doing.
Coming in at number 5, Michael Taylor. It's 1974, Yorkshire, England. Michael Taylor, age 31, father of 5 and husband to Christine Taylor. Michael was a well-mannered and caring father and husband. Michael, like anyone, became depressed from a back injury, left him short on work and seeming a little odd and off. After seeking religious advice and a one-on-one session at a local church, Michael started having outbursts and acting aggressively. Puzzled, he sought one-on-one sessions which turned ugly. After apparently changing form and attacking Marie, a young religious leader helping Taylor and unable to remember anything, Michael and the church agreed that an exorcism was necessary. Father Peter Vincent and Reverend Raymond Smith met at St. Thomas and started. It got so violent, he was tied to the church floor. After hours in the middle of the night, the two had managed to exorcise more than 40 demons out of Michael, in which appeared around them as they exited. Violence continued, leaving only 3 demons remaining for the next day. After returning home from the first session, Michael was found now only hours later, naked, in the middle of the street, covered head to toe in blood. Michael had returned home, to which then his wife and family dog lay dead as the police arrived in the AM. His wife, missing her eyes, tongue, and skin from the front of her skull. The dog, torn limb from limb and spread around the home. He was arrested soon after for the death of his wife. Michael had this to say about his late wife in court, quote, "I am released. I am released. It is done. The evil in her has been destroyed." Yeah, that was definitely a vessel for him. He was acquitted on psychological conditions and jury found that he met his breaking point during the exorcism that night. He was acquitted on insanity and remained in and out of facilities until he passed in 2013. Number 4, David Berkowitz. New York, 1976, and the police were busy on the search for a man shooting couples in the New York area, which had started to become a citywide phenomenon that summer. Brunette women with long hair frantically cut and dyed their hair blonde in fear. The .44 caliber killer was the title the press gave David in his earliest of assaults. After losing his job, David began to experience psychotic episodes and claimed that his neighbor's German shepherd had begun talking to him and eventually explained to David that he was a demon. He took the name after the pet's owner, Sam. It was this dog who ordered the killings by David and claims that the pet coaxed David into killing. David used this summer to shoot 8 people, resulting in 6 lives and the stabbings of 2 others. Using his .44 caliber bulldog revolver, David sent police on a wild goose chase around New York City with handwritten letters, David mocking the detectives with cryptic messages. Some of them explain who Sam is, and some of them explain what Sam does. Some mock police saying that they are never going to find or stop him. David was finally arrested just hours before his next planned victim's visit. He applauded police in their ability to stop him, in the back seat of the car, laughing and cheering. Although David pleaded not guilty to insanity and pleaded guilty, expressing that he was coaxed by the demon and that it demanded him to kill for hell, he was sentenced to 6 consecutive life sentences with parole after 25 years. During the mid-90s, he amended his confession and claimed that he had been a member of a violent satanic cult that orchestrated the incidents as ritual murder and pleaded guilty to stabbing and attempting to murder others before the shootings had even begun. His letters are public and spine-chilling. Check them out. Real Riddler stuff. Quote, "I am the monster. I am Beelzebub. I am the chubby behemoth. Police, let me haunt you with this. I'll be back. I'll be back. Yours in murder, Mr. Monster." Okay, his violent spree led the legal system to create a new law called Son of Sam's Law, designed to create criminals from financially profiting from the publicity created by their crimes, which, at the time, he was basically a celebrity. He remains in prison to this day. Number 3. Herbert Mullin. 1970s again. At the exact same time, in the same area, police had 2 serial killers to keep up with, Herbert Mullin and Edmund Kemper. No relationship to each other or each other's cases. Mullin was a paranoid schizophrenic in and out of mental health facilities in California during his teens. Mullin then kills 14 people during a 4-month period due to, quote, the impending natural disaster that would happen if he didn't. Mullin was convinced that the voice in his head he was hearing was telepathic. Mullin claims the voice of the Father had explained that the Vietnam War acted as a giant sacrifice that saved us from an earthquake and another one was coming soon. Constantly hearing the man's voice named the Father, encouraging him to gain more blood sacrifices, Mullin bludgeoned a man to death with a baseball bat. Mullin claims that the man was actually Jonah from the Bible and was begging him to sacrifice himself to Mullin. He then murdered a woman in the front seat of his car before dismembering her in a nearby park. Yeah, this is real satanic stuff, I told you. His third victim, a priest that he was confessing to in a Catholic church. Mullin says the priest claims to have telepathically begged him to sacrifice his life for the cause. Mullin then killed 5 people in one day. He claims that all the victims telepathically begged to be sacrificed as a good deed to the Father. Herbert Mullin remains in custody, and who was the father who kept talking to him through all of these people? Number 2, Richard Ramirez. This next guy is really nasty and deserves to be in the second spot. 13 counts of murder, 5 attempted murders, 11 assaults, and 14 burglaries. Sounds like a hell of a guy. The Night Stalker. Charming name for what this man did. Born in Texas, his older brother went to Vietnam and returned with some pretty gruesome stories and some pretty gruesome visuals. The young Ramirez, soaking all of this up, grows up obsessed with the satanic occult and fascinated. He made various references to Satan during his legal proceedings. His trial began in 1989 and he was convicted of 13 murders and a variety of other crimes. Nearly 2 months later, he was sentenced to death, with the judge stating that his crimes showed, quote, cruelty, callousness, and viciousness beyond any human understanding. And the worst part was that he made most of his victims pray to Satan and swear on Satan that they were going to tell him the truth whatever he asked. I'm not really going to get into the sick details of really what this man did, nor will I with the number 1 spot, but it involved hammers, machetes, ropes, knives, guns, you name it, anything violent. He was an absolute nasty creature that liked to torture his victims and really drive the satanic love for you-know-who. First responders would have taken pictures of numerous satanic symbols drawn on the walls in almost a ritualistic reenactment. He was captured by the use of the huge media surrounding his story on the way to take his next victim's life. His trial was truly a disgusting display of media attention, one of the most expensive court cases to date, losing only to O.J. Simpson. He screamed "Hail Satan" at his hearing and flashed self-harm pentagrams. He died of cancer in 2013. This guy must have signed some sort of book for you-know-who. Coming in at number 1, Charles Manson. Okay, so most of us are all familiar with this man and his famous case amongst American pop culture. Ramirez was said to have been a copycat of this man, and I can see why with all the satanicness. California in the late 1960s. A criminal, musician, and a victim of LSD studies, Charles Manson would go on to start and lead the Manson family cult. A small religious group with unclear motives but lost souls and a ton of drugs, and a father to now a family. In summer 1969, some of the cult members committed murders in LA. Apparently, Manson had ordered his followers to kill the people who had lived at the address he had given them for their initiation. The murder of actress Sharon Tate and 4 others in her home on August 8th and 9th, including the La Biancas the next day, another 2 victims. 4 members of the family committed the murders under Manson's instructions and satanic offering. Manson apparently heard voices that there was going to be a race war brought on by religious disputes, and that these killings were an offering to who exactly? The famous helter-skelter message, incoherent scribbles, blood all over the walls. They were then to hide underground in, quote, the bottomless pit under Death Valley, which Manson knew the location of, but instead were caught on the run days later. Manson was sentenced to life in prison under the pretense that he was the one who targeted, planned, and brainwashed his, quote, piggies into committing. While in prison, Charles was diagnosed with schizophrenia and paranoid delusion disorder, seeing visions and hearing voices for more than half of his life. He died in prison in 2017. Yeah, I've seen what Tarantino did with his latest movie, and it's definitely a subtle PG-13 fiction version of what actually went down on that night. What do you guys think? Do you think Charles saw the devil? I think he actually was the devil.
Number 5 on this list is the stone pressing. Let's take a second and think of the worst ways to die. Just a little thought experiment. Drowning, that would suck for sure. Apparently that is one of the worst pains you'll ever feel. Being burned alive, that would be really freaking bad. Nothing seems to hurt more than a bad burn. I think, getting eaten alive, like that's just full on getting mauled by something. That would suck. I can't imagine that would feel very good. But what you probably didn't think of there is getting squished. And to specifically qualify that, getting squished slowly. The reason that didn't come to mind is because no one really thinks about that as a way to go, but now that we are thinking about it, I think that ranks pretty high on my list of horrible ways to die. Getting squished slowly is exactly what happened to a poor man in the Salem witch trials. Ranker says 19 people were executed during the Salem witch trials in early 1691, most of whom were hanged. Giles Corey, however, received a different sentence. During his trial, his torturers tried to make him admit to practicing black magic and being devoted to the devil. They did this by piling rocks on his chest one by one while demanding he confess. All his neighbors watched as he was crushed in a pit, only willing to say, "More weight," rather than confess to something that he had not done. These proved to be his final words before he was pressed to death and was buried in an unmarked grave. Imagine just walking out your door one day, minding your own business, then getting taken away by the authorities, accused of something that you probably have absolutely no knowledge of, and then found guilty of that said thing. Then, as your punishment for that crime that you didn't do, you get taken to the public square and all of your neighbors and friends come out to watch as you get rocks slowly piled onto your body, eventually resulting in all of your bones to break and your internal organs to burst. Yeah. This really sucked for my dude Giles. The Salem witch trials, in my opinion, are one of the most messed up times in history. Like, that entire scenario is just one freaking mess, people losing their minds over something that they don't understand. And poor Giles got crushed for it, and now we can all remember on his tombstone. Number 4 on this list is specimens. Whenever I hear the word specimen, I get a pretty distinct image of science and laboratories, test subjects. I think of movie scenes where there are vials of weird substances and really smart people doing some really questionable forward-thinking stuff. What I really don't want to be thinking about though is dead bodies. That's pretty much what we have here though. Creepy says, Ohio Asylum is known for its creepy and thrilling gravestones. However, 2 of those gravestones are amongst the most horrific ones. These tombstones read the word specimens only, with no other details like date or name. What freaks people out is the imagination of what the word specimens could possibly be referring to. What are these specimens of? Many theories have been made. Specimens of body parts of the deceased or bodies of on whom the untested medications were tested. We always knew that the old asylums were bad news, but this is taking it to another level. Like old asylums back in the day would run some very questionable experiments against people's wills and do things that they never should have done. This was also absolutely ridiculous because the whole point of these places should have been to help people who are dealing with mental issues. Even after all of this though, I never would have thought that it would have gotten to this. To be sent to this place and then later, after having had multiple experiments done on you that your body probably didn't respond well to then be reduced to a small box buried outside that reads specimens on it. To not even have a name anymore, but just to be considered a failed science experiment. This is some super sick and twisted stuff right here, guys, and it's part of the reason why asylums were feared for so long. Number 3 on this list is the baby monster. This one is not only scary, but it's also really sad. If a gravestone has the word monster on it to describe what is underneath said gravestone, then one gets a pretty scary and creepy image. This is not the full truth though when it comes to what happened with this gravestone. Creepy says this tombstone was inscribed in a time when the word monster was often used to describe a person with serious deformities in any form. Considering that, and also the short span of time for which the baby lived, it can be theorized that the baby was severely deformed and could not live for very long. The death of said individual is not certain, and it's intriguing to know that no real name was given to this baby. When this would have been buried, you have to imagine that it would have been in an era where whatever deformities it did have wouldn't have been understood. People may have suspected the devil or some demonic presence to have caused what happened here. The sad truth is that this was a kid just like anyone else who just kinda got a little bit unlucky at birth. Back in this day, that sort of unluckiness though wouldn't have been accepted or tolerated. So in this case, we're just left with a really creepy gravestone that should make us all very thankful that we were born in this era and not back then when this sort of stuff would happen. Number 2 on this list is the Unforgiving Society. This next one should make you very happy that you live in the time period that you do now, but also make you think a lot about some of the recent political shifts going on in the United States. Creepy says, this tombstone is of a girl who died a sad death. She passed away in very unfortunate circumstances. She was impregnated before marriage, after which she struggled to get an abortion for her parents' honor. When making her tombstone, the creators could not help but feel guilt for her story. The words on the tombstone describe how unfair and unforgiving the cruel society had been to her. Now the tombstone actually reads, Kate McCormick, seduced and pregnant by her father's friend. Unwed, she died from abortion, her only choice. Abandoned in life and death by family, with but a single rose from her mother. Buried only through the kindness of unknown benefactors. Died February 1875, age 21. Victim of an unforgiving society, have mercy on us. Now the first thing that I thought of when I read this was the laws that are being stripped right now in the United States. This is a very polarizing issue where strong opinions are had on all sides, but this tombstone, in my opinion, is a clear example of what can happen when that right is stripped away from women. Kate didn't deserve the fate that she got, and maybe the scariest part about all of this is that this storyline, the one that we saw right here, I mean, a similar one could still happen today. And finally, number 1 on this list is Mary C. Donlenchi. Mary C. really wasn't too fond of the people who put her where she is now. In fact, she hated them so much that she put a curse on them, one that might still be running rampant throughout their bloodlines to this day. Her tombstone read, "May eternal damnation be upon those in wailing part who, without knowing me, have maliciously vilified me. May the curse of God be upon them and theirs." Now, the crazy part about all this though is that apparently her neighbors and the people that she's cursing, they didn't do anything wrong to her. Creepy says, as shown by the words on the tombstone, Mary C. felt nothing but anger towards her neighbors. The delusions she had of her neighbors conspiring against her are depicted on this tombstone. She left all of her possessions to the Massachusetts Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals after her death in 1985. The neighbors reported how the deceased used to constantly indulge in petty fights and negative behaviors. So apparently this curse was just her being super petty. Imagine you only have a few more words on planet Earth, and instead of like telling your family you love them and stuff, you decide to curse your neighbors who literally did nothing wrong to you. This curse hasn't been super effective though, which is a good thing. Apparently some of the members of the cursed family have noticed something every now and again, but nothing too major that should make anybody freak out. Still though, really hoping that I don't become my neighbor's punching bag and get cursed from beyond the grave for literally nothing. Number 5 on this list is Jennifer Perez. Jennifer is currently on, I think, what a lot of people would describe as a good path, but it wasn't always that way. For a while there, Jen was going down a really bad path. Drugs and alcohol and depression, they ran her life, and things, they weren't looking too bright for Jennifer. In fact, it got so bad that one evening in the early 2000s, her body couldn't hold up anymore. And she died. It was in that time of death that she visited hell and saw the actual devil. Now it didn't start out like that. Apparently her heart stopped and the first place she went was heaven. However, she wasn't allowed into heaven. The way she ran her life and the neglect that she had shown to her relationships was not going to grant her passageway. So they sent her down to hell. It was a horrible place, she said. As she fell from heaven's gates, it got hotter and hotter and hotter. The heat was unbearable and the air was filled with an intense smell of sulfur. Then she saw the people. thousands upon thousands of them getting brutally tortured by all kinds of demons in all kinds of horrific fashions. And at the heart of it all, a massive red creature who she assumed must have been the devil. Eyes glaring, watching over all of it, almost like the way Sauron watches over things in The Lord of the Rings. Before she hit the hot hellish ground though, she woke up. She was revived, and her life was saved. From that point on, she has completely changed her way of life and tried to do everything in her power to never end up in that horrible place again with the devil watching over all of it. I imagine that if I ever saw the devil up close and personal like that, I might change my way of living as well. Number 4 on this list is Sim Calpin. Sim Calpin is a Reddit user who believes that several years ago they saw a demon, or maybe even the devil, in their own home. They write, "When I was about 17, I woke up in the middle of the night thirsty and I went into the kitchen to get some water. When I walked into the kitchen and flipped on the light, I saw what I can only describe as a large golem-looking creature. It looked me in the face and then screeched, a noise I will never forget, and then crawled on the walls into the unlit part of the house. Well, I wasn't sleeping or dreaming. I ran into my room and turned on music and did not sleep the rest of the night. I've only told a handful of people about it, and yes, I'm completely serious." I've never heard of the devil as being a golem creature, but it's certainly not impossible. What the devil would have been doing in your home, clutching your ceiling in the middle of the night, now that's a better question. Personally, this probably rings closer to a demon than the actual devil himself. No disrespect to Sim Calpin here, but unless there is something particularly special about him, his family, or his home, then I don't really see why the devil would have been there. But then again, why is the devil doing anything that he's doing? Why would a demon have been there? There are a lot of questions involved in this story, and obviously Sim wasn't in a position to be able to ask when he ran into this thing at the time. At least it stayed in the kitchen and didn't follow him upstairs. Number 3 on this list is Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ was a very real dude, and he definitely lived one heck of a life. Now, he may not have actually seen the devil necessarily, but he definitely saw hell and all of its horrible details. There's a text called the Apocalypse of Peter that is written by the disciple Peter and describes the divine visions that Christ had of hell. Wikipedia says, the work details both heavenly bliss for the saved and infernal punishments for the damned. In particular, the punishments are graphically described in a physical sense and generally correspond to lex talionis. Blasphemers are hung by their tongues, liars who bear false witness have their tongues set on fire eternally, callous rich people are made to wear rags and be pierced by sharp stones as would beggars, and so on. Yeah, so even though Jesus didn't necessarily see the devil, he saw what the devil was up to, and none of it's pretty good. I don't know about you folks, but I like my tongue the temperature that it's currently at, and having it lit on fire for eternity doesn't really sound like the best way to spend my time. It's no wonder Jesus preached so much about love and God and everything. My dude literally saw what was going to happen to all of us if we didn't do any of that. Jesus straight up knew that the devil was just waiting for the moment your soul passed over to hang you by your tongue and torture you forever. Number 2 on this list is Patrick Antle. Patrick had a horrifying encounter with a demon several years back when he was 17. He's 23 now, but it's taken him that long to even speak about the event that transpired. At the time, he lived with his parents in Cincinnati. One evening, Patrick decided to sneak out and go to a local high school party. The sneaking out process worked out fine and he made it to the party safely. It was on his way back though that he had the scariest moment of his life. He was walking back the way he came to go back home a little bit past 2 a.m. The area that he was in was rural and there weren't too many houses that he passed by. However, when he turned down the second last street before his own, he saw a house on the side of the road. It's a house. This shouldn't be anything serious, but what struck him as being weird was that he'd never seen that house before. Now, Patrick had been drinking a little bit that evening, so he just chalked it up to being a little bit drunk and kept walking down the street. When he was passing right in front of this house though, he stopped and glanced at it and noticed the garage door was open. Only a few seconds had passed when out of the darkness of the garage door, 2 red glowing eyes appeared in the night. His body immediately froze, and even though his mind was telling him to run, his limbs didn't want to cooperate. Standing stuck in the middle of the road, paralyzed, Patrick got struck with an overwhelming fear that his life might end right there, right then. The eyes dug into his skull and felt as if they were infiltrating his soul. Then he heard a voice. A voice that wasn't coming from the garage, but one that was actually coming right out of his own head. The voice was a deep, guttural snarl that said, "Turn away now or your body will burn in the deep fires of hell and your soul will be tormented for eternity." The message ended and his body hit the ground. He didn't take any time to think about what had happened, but just got up, ran home as fast as he could. It took him several weeks to work up the courage, but eventually he went back to that road and saw that the house that he had seen that evening wasn't there anymore. To this day, he has no idea what happened to him or who that was, but he believes that there is a really strong possibility that he encountered the devil and for some reason, it decided to let him live. And finally, number 1 on this list is Sister Josefa Menendez. Born in 1890 and only living 33 years, Sister Josefa Menendez saw her fair share of hell. She was constantly bombarded with visions of hell and the devil himself. So much so that she wrote about this in a book called The Way of Divine Love. The purpose of the book was to lead people away from hell and the devil, but writing it must have been difficult because she would have ran into Satan himself way too many times. Eternally burning fire and dark, never-ending corridors. That's what she saw hell to be filled with. All the souls and people who were sent there, the devil would suck the capability of love and compassion from them so that they could no longer feel any positive emotions at all. It was just depression and grief for those that got sent here. The devil was a dark creature in her visions who would eat these happy emotions up but not feel any of them himself. She saw these visions and warned us about them so that we wouldn't have to see them. I recommend heeding her warning. Number 5 on this list is Weirdo. This one's a bit weird. Michelle Clark Miller says, "Not me, but my uncle's best friend actually went to hell. My uncle was a Vietnam vet and was still close with some members of his platoon. One of them, nicknamed Weirdo, had the usual problems with most traumatized vets. He drank, he did drugs, he beat on people. He'd been in and out of jail, in and out of rehab. Then one day he had a heart attack and died on the table. He said he woke up in a dark place full of volcanoes, swamps. He said it smelled awful and all you could hear was people screaming. He said he was full of fear, dread, and despair, but when he turned around to run, all he saw was fire, lava, smoke, and tar. Then he heard a man's voice say, 'You have one more chance, Jonathan.' That was his real name. Next thing he knew, he was in a hospital room surrounded by his wife, his Vietnam buddies, and their families. And yeah, he turned his life around. Yeah, I think my life would be 100% different if I straight up went to hell, saw the devil there, saw how bad hell actually was, and then had him tell me that if I don't figure it out, I'm basically gonna be here for all eternity. No, 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 no. Yeah, that would straight up traumatize me forever, guys. I think what's kind of crazy about this, though, is that he got a second chance. Like, you think about the devil, and you don't really think about the devil giving out a whole lot of second chances. Maybe he was just in a good mood or something. I don't know what it was, but hopefully Weirdo got the memo and doesn't need to go back there anytime soon. Number 4 on this list is your deepest desire. This is a story from a Quora user named JP. Somebody asked them if they had ever spoken to the devil and they replied, "I believe so. I woke up one morning facing the wall of my bedroom. Bed was pushed up against the wall. Rolled over the other direction and there standing in front of me was a guy just standing there. Wearing a suit, very typical of a well-dressed businessman. I was going through a rough time, personal stuff. He says one thing to me, 'I can give you what you want.' All while this is going on, I felt no worries or fear. Seemed oddly normal. My answer was, and still is, no. I did know what he was offering. I wanted it, but not for free. I had no belief one way or another about God at the time. I wouldn't say I didn't believe, I just never put much thought into religion. I can now say without a doubt God exists. Not because I've seen him or met him, but because I've met his enemy. My life has never been the same. I feel now without any choice of my own. I live with one foot in the spirit and one foot in the real world. Wish I could go back to being ignorant. And for that reason alone, I am happy to have never faced the devil head on like JP has. All innocence is gone from you after you see and hear something like that. Now you know that everything you do, you are being watched by the devil and also by God too. Pretty scary thing to wake up to there. Number 3 on this list is the purple golf cart. So I told this story in another video we did talking about the devil, but I have to tell it again considering how terrifying it actually is. Jeremy is a 31-year-old man who just over a decade ago lost his father. On that day, the one of the death though, he received a crazy message, one that haunts him to this day. It was early in the morning and Jeremy was on his way to work. His phone rang, he didn't know the number. Jeremy picked it up. He said hello. No response, the line was flat. He could tell that someone was on the other end, but they didn't say anything back. He said hello again. Nothing. He thinks, okay, butt dial, and is about to hang up when a muffled voice comes up. The voice sounded identical to his father's. His father's voice was soft and there was something wrong. It almost felt as if his father was being forced to speak. He told Jeremy to beware of the purple golf cart and that if he saw it, it meant that he was going straight to hell. Before Jeremy could ask any questions, a loud maniacal laugh was heard over the receiver and the phone hung up. He was rightfully freaked out at this point, so he quickly dialed up to his dad. No answer. Then he called his mother. She picked up and he heard sobbing. She told him that she was just about to call him and that his father had just died. He was out on the golf course driving around a purple golf cart and the cart's brakes stopped working. He accidentally drove straight off of a cliff. From that day forward, Jeremy is a full believer in the devil and in hell. He's told his story many times and thinks that when he received that unknown phone call, it was actually his dad calling him from hell. The devil was forcing him to call his son, and that maniacal laugh at the end of the call was the devil himself loving the brutality of it all. Jeremy hasn't come within a golf course ever since that call and refuses to. Golf carts, or frankly anything golf related, is strictly off limits for him. If he touches or even sees a purple golf cart, that could be the end. And honestly, I know being scared of a purple golf cart sounds kind of ridiculous, but if I got that phone call, then I'd be feeling the exact same way. Number 2 on this list is I can't wait. I can't wait. Those are the words that Serena heard back in 2011 when she had a face-to-face encounter with the devil. She was snorkeling out in Australia at the time. She was a regular and knew her way around the reef. This time though, she made an almost fatal mistake. She was stung by a creature that did not want to be disturbed. Her whole body froze up and it went into shock. Her one friend, who was snorkeling with her, noticed after a few minutes and dragged her to shore. At this point though, she had taken in so much water and the sting was really bad. She was fading very fast. While her friend called the ambulance and tried to get help, Serena was in her own world entirely. That world was hell. Serena traveled to hell and was standing on top of a mountain looking down at the flames and death below. People strung up getting abused by demons of all shapes and sizes. The torture was horrible and the screams were even worse. Shadow creatures flew and circled around the skies and clouds shot down lightning that was actually fire. It was truly hell being there. Then the entire world started to shift and a giant creature that Serena could only imagine and was the devil took shape in the sky. It smiled and cackled and looked straight at her. Then it said, "I can't wait to meet you, Serena. See you very soon." And just like that, her eyes opened and she saw a paramedic reviving her on the beach. She had died for a little bit there and went to hell, and the devil himself stopped in to tell her how excited he was to meet her. Since then, Serena has quit snorkeling completely, probably for the best after an experience like that. And finally, number 1 on this list is the end. The devil has a lot of powers. We probably don't even know what they all are, to be honest, considering most people who deal with the devil don't last long enough to tell us about them. Either way, he is clearly a very powerful creature, and knowing when the world will end, that could be one of his capabilities. Well, apparently Bill Madigan had a run-in with him, and he told him just that. Bill was walking around the Black Forest in Germany, a haunted forest that we've actually talked a lot about on this channel before. He was hiking around when he saw some bright red glowing in the distance. He approached it and realized something was very wrong. He decided that he wanted to turn around and got a bad feeling, but his body actually wouldn't let him. His feet just kept walking in the direction of the light even though he wanted to stop. Finally, he got to the source of the light and he saw what he could only believe to be the devil performing some very sick and sadistic rituals that I can't even get into deep detail about because it's that bad. The devil looked at Bill right in his eyes and told him that he could take his life now, but instead of doing that, he wanted Bill to see his grand finale. He also told Bill that he wouldn't have to wait very long, only 2 decades from now his grand finale would be revealed. This happened back in 2016, so if we do the math, that would mean that the world might end in 2036. That doesn't leave us a whole lot of time, folks.
Number 5. Menangle. Starting off of our list of horrifying cryptids that would have the devil checking underneath his bed is the Menangle, a demonic vampire spirit of the Philippines. Now, there is a good chance that I am horribly mispronouncing that name. My Tagalog ain't quite what it used to be. Just being a big vampire creature would be enough to earn a spot on this list, but the Menangle doesn't settle for just the bare minimum. Oh, no. This creep turns it up all the way. Listen to me describe this monster and tell me that it wouldn't be out of place in Elden Ring attacking you in the horrible wastes of Caelid. The Menangle is a humanoid bat creature hybrid. And a quick aside, while I was doing some research for this video, I found it really interesting that nearly every culture has their own variation of a humanoid bat cryptid. There's the Ahul in Indonesia, Kongamato in some African regions, and Bruce Wayne in North America. The Menangle has giant leathery bat wings, which it uses to sweep through the night, grabbing its prey and fleeing off. And we haven't even started talking about the Menangle's namesake and action feature. Its name comes from the Tagalog word tangle, which means to separate, with its full name roughly translating to one who separates itself. Well, whatever does that mean? Well, it's because this nightmare creature can split itself in half, taking to the skies as a disembodied torso with flapping bat wings screeching around. Can you even imagine how soul-stoppingly scary it would be to see a giant bat monster flying around with like its entrails just hanging out for everybody to see, hanging loose like an old man in a gym shower? Its favorite prey is couples, young newlyweds in love, and also people who are sleeping. No respect from this thing. You shouldn't attack sleeping lovers. If you're hearing this and you're locking your doors, a Menangle is said to be thwarted by garlic. Now, garlic will thwart it, but not slay it. I'm just glad I eat so much garlic, and I'm very repugnant, and I'm gonna be alone for the rest of my life, so I have no danger of Menangles. Now, if you want loads more cryptid content, we have got enough to fill up a zoo worth of the creepiest critters ever to crawl through the woods. Not your jam? We got aliens, monsters, movies, true crime, fake crime, and a lot of videos about a big shark. There's a little something to scare everybody. So hit that bell, stay subscribed, and stay scared. And please stay watching this video. I worked hard finding all these cryptids for you. Number 4. Jotagumo. One of you delightful little ghouls in a previous video left a comment suggesting this one for me, and I thank you so much for putting me on the trail of this cryptid. I wouldn't have heard about it before, so shout out to the Phantom Spectator for this one. The Jotagumo is a monster of Japanese folklore that's kind of like a succubus, but with a bit more of an arachnid twist. I can't say the name of what Jotagumo translates to and stay within YouTube guidelines, but just know that it is extremely funny. I will give you a hint. Oldest profession spider. Ask your parents. Jotagumo is considered a yokai, basically a Japanese demon. It's a powerful shapeshifter, maintaining the form of a beautiful young woman to seduce its prey and able to transform into a vicious spider to finish the job off. What's she like to eat? Well, she has more acquired tastes than flies and grasshoppers. The Jotagumo likes young, handsome men who are lonely and looking for love. When in her humanoid form, she'll seduce them, invite them back to her lair, and well, you can probably guess how it goes. The folklore behind Jotagumo is fascinating. In Edo period Japan, spiders were considered to be mythical creatures with alien abilities, which, I mean, come on, totally reasonable. And it was said that the older a spider gets, the more powerful and potent its abilities would become, kind of like a wizard. A Jotagumo is a spider that's lived for hundreds of years to be able to shapeshift, and she doesn't even look a day over 25, not bad. An old folktale tells the story of a woodcutter who fell in love with a woman he met at a waterfall. He visited her every day but grew weaker with each visit. A priest accompanied him one day, and when a spider thread reached out to the woodcutter, the priest yelled, warning the woodcutter that the woman he loved was a dreaded Jotagumo. Already ensnared by her spell, he persisted and ran towards the waterfall, where he was entangled in the web and never seen again. Number 3. The Beast of Exmoor. Whoa! With a name like the Beast of Exmoor, this thing's gotta be good, right? The Beast of Exmoor sounds like something you and a party of adventurers would set out to slay to restore peace and balance to Eternia. So what is the mighty Beast of Exmoor? Well, it's in Exmoor in the UK, which is a real place and not a fantasy castle, where it gets its name, and locals tell the story of a gigantic, elusive cat. In the 80s, there were all sorts of stories and sightings of a massive cat being described as similar to a puma or a panther being spotted around the Exmoor area. A farmer around the area claimed that he had lost over 100 sheep in his care, and all of them lost in strange, unnervingly violent ways. Injuries that looked like a feral creature had mauled them. Skin peeled back, skulls crushed, throats cut. This grew the notoriety of the elusive creature, and where all these sightings come from. People would claim that they'd see this huge beast like a black leopard stalking the plains. In fact, it was theorized for a while that it was possible that the beast of Exmoor was a cougar or another big cat that had been owned by some sort of exotic collector, not naming any particular reality TV big cat owners, that had either gotten loose or let out into the wild to roam free, wreaking absolute havoc on an otherwise sleepy countryside. The problem got so bad that the Daily Express, which admittedly is a gossip rag, offered a cash reward for anyone who could bring the body of the beast of Exmoor. Unfortunately, Geralt of Rivia was preoccupied, so no one was able to take this deal up. In 2006, a Devon farmer noticed the bones of a puma on his estate, which is odd, as there are very few pumas roaming the British countryside. There's cougars, yes, there's a lot of cougars in Great Britain and the UK, but I wouldn't consider Catherine Zeta-Jones a threat. So was the bones found the remnants of the beast of Exmoor? Or does this elusive cryptid still stalk the night, attacking sheep? The frustrating thing about hunting a cat cryptid is there's no way it's gonna come when you call it. Best thing you can do is put out a big cardboard box and hope that it'll jump inside that, because it's a cat. Number 2, Goatman. Okay, some of these cryptids have been a little grounded, realistic animals that got loose or whatever. I'm over that. We need one on this list that's just completely out there in every regard, supernatural and wild. So let's discuss the nastiest kid in Maryland, the Goatman. Now, he might look a bit like Mr. Tumnus, beloved childhood character, but he is not taking you anywhere as nice as Narnia anytime soon, and he sure as heck don't got no Turkish delight for you. He manifests as a half-human, half-goat, a satyr of sorts. His sightings and descriptions describe him as having a goat's head and the body of a man. The legend of the Goatman started down in Maryland, and is primarily where most of his legends come from, but he's also been sighted around Louisiana and Texas as well. We love a Goatman that's well-traveled. Goats have been figures in myths and folklore for generations, with goats thought to be associated with Satan and demons, but the Goatman himself is all Maryland. Depending on who's telling the story, he's just a supernatural entity that wanders the woods, or maybe he's a former goat farmer who became deranged after losing one too many goats and he's a madman in a costume. If that origin leaves a little bit to be desired, he's also got a fantastic comic book bad guy origin story where he's the product of a science experiment gone wrong to, I don't know, merge a man with a goat, I guess. Anyway, he breaks out of the lab Stranger Things style and creeps through the woods, hatchet in hand, attacking passersby dare disturb his territory with an axe. The Goatman was a fairly popular campfire story and urban legend through the 70s and 80s amongst teenagers, where the creature was said to haunt Lover's Lane, looking for canoodlers where he'd split up the action with a sharp axe like he's Jason Voorhees with a set of horns. For any of my Maryland viewers, shout out for me. Is Goatman still a big deal? Do the kids still tell stories about him? I love this guy, so I am curious. Number 1, the Hatman. Now, a lot of these entries and stories and cryptids have been told for generations over and over, so I think it's only fitting that I get with the times a little bit and we start talking about a modern cryptid. The Hatman is the most recently talked about cryptid on this list, if you can call it that. Is cryptid the right word for a shadow person? I don't know, but it's my list, and if anyone wants to correct me, the Hatman is welcome to come down to the studio. Interestingly, almost everyone who reports seeing this mysterious Hatman describes it almost exactly the same way. A spindly, tall, shadowy figure that is wearing a hat, hence the name. Some people see a top hat, some see an old, like, newsman's fedora. Everyone says his attire is out of date by a century or two, so no new era fitted on this guy. You can't see his face at all, just shadows, and the only thing you can make out are his dead, pinprick eyes, shining red in contrast to the darkness of the rest of his physique. And he is watching you. Now, what does the Hatman do besides checking in on you at night? People who report seeing him appear to be people who are suffering from sleep paralysis or insomnia, and most sightings or reports describe him as being benign, if not terrifying. Watching you, studying you, what have you. There are some, however, who claim that he's not just a visitor and he's a little more sinister than that. Some people tell stories of getting an appearance from the Hatman and feeling choked or burning sensations on their scalps or chest, or just feeling like a general general overwhelming terror and nausea, which I think is totally reasonable if there was a shadow demon in the corner of my room watching me. Now, some people who've seen him claim that he feeds off your emotions, and that the people who are visited by the Hatman are those who are already struggling with something like great stress or mental illness, which is probably definitely not made better by a shadow demon. Sometimes people in the same family claim that they can see him. So what's he doing? Is he targeting specific people, or is it certain emotions that he hungries about? Thinking about him already is enough to make my hair stand on end and squint at the coat rack in my room when I turn the lights off. I think I'm gonna sleep with just the lights on tonight, just to like be safe and make sure my cats don't bump into anything or anything.
Number 5 on this list is the Devil's Town. The Devil's Town is a place in Serbia that's basically a collection of very interesting natural forming rocks, or at least we think it's natural forming. Mehana Mihajovic says the Devil's Town is one of the widely known places in Serbia. Situated between two ravines of the creepy names the Devil's Ravine and Hell's Ravine, there lies the spookiest natural monument. Over 200 randomly formed stone poles up to 20 meters in height. Almost all the poles carry the black cap from volcanic rock andesite, adding to the overall peculiar atmosphere around the place. Close to the locality, there are fresh mineral water wells and ruins of an old church. The mysticism of the Devil's Town Natural Monument keeps fueling the imagination of the local people. One of the widely known legends suggests that a long time ago, local people threw a wedding party for a brother and a sister that fell in love with little help from the devil's spells. God wanted to punish all the attendees and turned them into the stones where they still lay to this day. The other legend suggests that the devil's poles are actually local kids who refused to learn and decided to live an immoral life stripped of knowledge. It sure sounds like a great way to make your kids do their homework. So regardless of which legend you choose to believe in, this is evidence that the devil was once around here. As far as what sort of message this leaves behind, I guess you need to be the one to decide, right? Is this a way for the devil to just reinforce his legitimacy? Is this a way for the devil to instill fear in people? Is this a way for the devil to tell us that we should actually be fearing God? These are all interesting things to consider and think about when we're talking about the Devil's Town. I will say something and give the devil a little credit. If these rocks were actually formed by him in some devilish activity, then honestly, nice work, man. They're very cool and made a strong push to become part of the 7 natural wonders of the world. Maybe people decided to leave them out of that list though, because promoting something created by the devil himself might not be the best idea. Comment down below what you guys think this weird and creepy formation of rocks could truly mean. Number 4 on this list is Hotel California. Hotel California is right up there as being one of rock's best songs ever. I feel like I have a very special connection to the Eagles classic because I remember in 10th grade or sometime in high school, I had to do a project breaking down a classic song and looking at the lyrics and really evaluating them. I decided to do mine on Hotel California, and it was through this project that I learned something very interesting about this piece of music. Hotel California may have been partly written by the devil. Thoman says it's not only on Halloween that you can expect the devil to be up to no good in the background. For example, with the super hit Hotel California by the Eagles, when played in reverse, the secret message says, "Satan, he hears this. He had me believe, incredible or verifiable." Was the ruler of hell involved making the Eagles' greatest hits album the best-selling album of the 20th century in the US? Now this is the message you get when you play it backwards, but you don't even need to play it backwards to get some pretty weird messages just listening to it in general. The whole song itself is a complete trip. One line in the song says, "This could be heaven or this could be hell." Another line says, "We are all just prisoners here of our own device." And finally the song finishes by saying, "You can check out any time you like, but you can never leave." The whole song itself could be one big metaphor for hell, let alone the secret message in the song that you hear when you listen to it in reverse. What do you guys think? Was this actually the work from the devil? Number 3 on this list is the Devas. The Devas actually come from the religion Zoroastrianism and are part of that religion's demonic entities. If you're unfamiliar with that religion, then just just know that it is one of the oldest religions ever and is still being practiced today? Well, there are tons of messages in scripture and artwork describing these demons that basically act as warning messages to all who may have the misfortune of running into them. Grunge says, traditionally devas are thought to be the creation of Ahriman, an antagonist and equally powerful counterpart to the benevolent creator. In one of their religious texts, the Gathas, devas are described as rejected gods with an affinity for evil who, for whatever reason, still hold sway with some followers. One of their chief character traits is an inability to discern truth from lies, making them at least psychologically adjacent and possibly directly related to most roommates that you've likely met on Craigslist. All kidding aside though, these things can be very, very dangerous, and many people believe that a lot of the work and scripture that talks about them, that was actually left behind from the devil. The purpose of doing this was to strike fear into people and make them start to distrust their fellow human. Number 2 on this list is the Blood Falls. Once again, we have a naturally occurring wonder that people believe is actually a hidden message from the devil. Let me tell you the geological explanation of this, and then I'll tell you the possible demonic explanation. Atlas Obscura says, roughly 2 million years ago, the Taylor Glacier sealed beneath it a small body of water, which contained an ancient community of microbes. Trapped below a thick layer of ice, they have remained there ever since, isolated inside a natural time capsule. Evolving independently of the rest of the living world, these microbes exist in a place with no light or free oxygen and little heat, and are essentially the definition of primordial ooze. The trapped lake has very high salinity and is rich in iron, which is what gives the waterfall its red color. A fissure in the glacier allows the subglacial lake to flow out, forming the falls without contaminating the ecosystem within. So that's the geological explanation. The one involving the devil isn't as calm and cool though. This legend says that a man died and was sent to hell. Now he got there and obviously didn't love where he was. The man was continuously tortured and mistreated, as we can all expect from being in hell. Well, apparently this particular man wasn't about staying here forever. One day he attempted a daring escape and actually made it pretty far. He found a gateway between hell and the natural world. This gateway led directly to Antarctica, where the falls are now. He made it back to our physical world, but then the devil showed up. The devil brutally mutilated and cut the man to pieces, creating a waterfall of blood. The devil then sealed this blood in ice as a warning and message to everyone left on Earth never to attempt to go in or out of hell. Finally, number 1 on this list is the Codex Gigas. This book often makes all of our lists when we're talking about the most haunted or most cursed books ever, and rightfully so. This book, written many, many years ago, was literally by the hand of the devil. Mental Floss says the book's sinister reputation stems from a full-color portrait of the devil contained in its pages and a legend about how the image got there. According to folklore, the book is the work of a monk, possibly Hermanus Hermitas or Herman the Recluse, who had broken his vows and been sentenced to be walled up alive in the monastery. He struck a deal to save himself. If, over the course of a single night, he could write a book containing all the world's knowledge, his life would be spared. When he realized the task was impossible, the monk sold his soul to the devil, who helped him finish the book and signed it with the now infamous portrait. Now, I'd love to tell you guys what message the devil left for us in here, but that would require me to read the book myself, which I have absolutely no intention of ever doing. Legends have been told of people becoming insane and losing their minds and all sense of reality after reading it. So, even if I did read it with the intention of relaying the messages to you guys, I don't know if I'd even be capable of doing so. It's been kept in Sweden's National Library and has been there for several hundred years if you guys wanted to go and give it a read. I don't recommend it. Number 5 on this list is the Panama 7. The following story happened only a few years ago and is a horrifying tale where 7 people in Panama were found dead from a terrifying ritual. The BBC writes 10 people have been arrested on suspicion of murder. The suspects and all victims were thought to belong to the Nagobi indigenous community. The grave was discovered after 3 villagers escaped and made their way to a local hospital last weekend, prosecutor Rafael Baloy said. They then alerted authorities about several families being held by an indigenous-run sect. On Wednesday, police raided the community located in a jungle region in northwest Panama Panama, some 250 kilometers from the capital Panama City. They were performing a ritual inside the structure. In that ritual, there were people being held against their will, being mistreated, said Mr. Belois. All of these rites were aimed at killing them if they didn't repent their sins. Inside the makeshift church, officers found a naked woman, machetes, knives, and a ritually sacrificed goat, Mr. Belois said. The site was controlled by a religious sect called the New Light of God, believed to have been operating in the region for about 3 months. According to Mr. Belois, the kidnapping and torture started last Saturday after one of the members claimed to have received a message from God. The victims were then kidnapped from their homes, beaten, and killed. So let me ask you guys, does that sound like something that God would tell you to do? Gather up a bunch of people, hold them against their will, and torture and kill them? To me, if any sort of entity was to tell you to do something like that, then that would be a demon or maybe the devil. Maybe that demonic entity would portray themselves as God or someone else, but I don't know what type of God would do something like this. To be completely honest, folks, I'm really not a religious person, so when I hear something like this, I believe that this was the work of people who were extremely sick or misguided. But I can guarantee to them, they probably really felt like they were acting as the vessel for some higher being. I think in this instance though, they really did misjudge who that higher being was. This happened literally back in 2020 as well, guys, so really not that long ago. My heart truly does go out to the people that were killed and to the families of those who were taken way too soon.